Opening credits. Bear Lust. Shifter Paranormal Romance Short Story. By Selena Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Chapter 1. The thunder crashed, and Casey snuggled down further on the couch. Her third glass of wine glinted red in the firelight. She had stopped drinking an hour ago, realizing just how drunk she was getting, but bitter reminiscing just seemed better with a glass of wine in her hand. If she was being honest with herself, she was taking a certain satisfaction in knowing that she was approaching this entirely the wrong way. A productive adult would handle a breakup by going on with their life as normal. Maybe they would indulge in a set of new workout gear, or a few meals worth of Chinese food, or a haircut or something. Casey, on the other hand, had spent 2 days in bed, bawling her eyes out while wearing an oversized t-shirt, and had then proceeded to pack a backpack, not even a suitcase, and run away to her family's cabin upstate, where she was now drowning her sorrows in wine. Maybe, she thought, she should cap it all off by getting a tattoo. What tattoo said, "My boyfriend left me for his sister's nanny"? She took a gulp of wine and groaned. The nanny was, well, just what Casey had been once, young, gorgeous, and cheerful. And Casey was that woman, the one pushing 30 and finding gray hairs, who was, to top it all off, going to have a killer hangover tomorrow morning because she couldn't drink like she used to. And she knew if she told anyone about this, they would roll their eyes and tell her how pretty she was and how 30 wasn't old. So she hadn't told anyone. She wanted to wallow, damn it. The thunder crashed again and she jumped. She drained the glass of wine and reached for the bottle. 1 glass left. She should stop. But she should also be home in New York, already asleep because she had work tomorrow, and she wasn't doing that either. She poured the last of the bottle out, and then tipped her head back on the arm of the couch and sighed. She had really thought Eric was the one. Never hitting on her friends, always respectful, and a career on track for spectacular things. And now all that was left was a hurried, "I think we made a mistake," and some bitter words about wasting 3 years, and he was off with a 19-year-old while Casey drank herself stupid, alone in a cabin. One of them was clearly getting the better end of the deal, and it wasn't her. Another crash sounded, and this time it wasn't thunder. Casey sat up, her heart pounding. It was nothing. It was the wind. It was her sister here to check on her. Casey would have groaned at the thought of Jenna's lecture, only she was suddenly very, very certain that it wasn't any of those things. She put the wine on the table and crawled, staying low, to look out the sliding doors at the end of the kitchen. And screamed. The bear was dragging itself slowly up the lawn, the shattered remains of the picnic table lying on the storm-soaked grass, and its eyes were fixed on the cabin. It was coming for food. It was coming now. It did not wander, sniffing as an animal should. It was taking a straight path, and it was coming for her. Casey scrambled back, upsetting the coffee table and hearing the glass shatter on the hearth. She paused stupidly, thinking she should get a sponge and... Bear. There was a bear. She ran for the coat closet, fumbling through layers of winter coats and snowshoes until the heavy shotgun case emerged. She hauled it out, fumbled at the latches. Locked. Damn it. She dragged it with her as she crouched and ran back to the kitchen. Ammo in the bottom drawer, keys in the top drawer. She hid behind the counter, as she pulled the drawers open carefully and extracted what she needed. A quick glance around the counter showed the bear still limping its way up the lawn. It was almost at the porch. Oh God. Her fingers were sluggish because of the wine, and shaking with adrenaline. Casey fumbled with the locks, checking to see if the barrel of the gun was clean before loading the ammo. There was a sound behind her that made her nearly leap out of her skin, and the sound of the storm swirled into the kitchen. The door was open. Casey clapped her hand over her mouth, trying not to scream. She could run, but she wouldn't make it 10 feet. Never run from a bear, her father used to say. She was going to have to be brave. Casey took a deep breath, trying to prepare herself for what she was going to see. If she didn't stand up now, right now, the bear was going to find her, and she wasn't going to have time to get the shot out. Stand up, Casey. Stand up. She stood, aimed, and yelled at the top of her lungs. The bear halfway through the door stopped dead in its tracks. Get out of my house. Real smart, Casey. Because bears understand English. Get out. Go. She forced her trembling legs to advance. It took a step back, swinging its head side to side. Almost, she would have said, it was pleading with her. When it looked up, its eyes fixed on hers, and they were nothing like the cold black her sister had mentioned once. She'd fled out of the woods at a dead run with their dog barking so hard they all thought he'd been dragged off, and Jenna kept gasping that the bear had the cruelest, coldest eyes she'd ever seen. She said it was going to kill her, and Casey wondered why that was such a surprise, and now here they were. If she got out of this alive, she was going to tell Jenna that bear's eyes looked just like human eyes. It took a low, shuffling step towards her, hanging its head. Blood was pooling on the floor around her feet. Go. Casey took another step, and another. The bear backed away, little sounds of distress escaping from its snout. What, was it afraid of the storm? Casey almost laughed and bit her lip. She was barely holding it together, as things stood now. She forced the bear out onto the porch, screaming like a drill sergeant, and stopped when the creature was back on the lawn. Her hands were so slippery with sweat that she wasn't sure she could hold onto the gun much longer. It tried once more, slinking towards the porch stairs like some sort of overgrown dog, and she screamed, really screamed. She aimed, feeling tears on her cheeks, and pulled the trigger. Thank God her father had taught her to shoot. The bottom step exploded into wood chips, and the bear scrambled away, roaring. I don't want to hurt you. Casey screamed. She chambered another round, shaking so hard she could hardly stand, and aimed again. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered again. It stared at her for a long moment, and she almost lowered the gun, the eyes were so sad. When a howl sounded from the rain-swept forest, it turned and ran, its uneven gait carrying it over the lawn and into the trees at a limping run. Casey leaned against the doorframe. She was making a sound she couldn't quite put a name on, somewhere between a hysterical laugh and a sob, and she really needed to put the gun away before it went off. Wolves? There was a bear and there were wolves, and the bear had opened the door. Her blood went ice cold and she whirled, slamming the door shut. She needed to call Jenna and their parents and the police and anyone at all. And then she needed to get the hell out of here, or maybe put all the furniture on the stairs and sleep in the attic. She laid the gun on the counter, no longer sure she wanted to unload it after all, and went for the phone. A loud cracking sound came next, lightning flaring, and the lights in the cabin flickered and died. Casey looked out in time to see the light pole nearby tip into the trees, yanking the power lines down with it. At any other time, she might have screamed. Now she had no more energy than to watch it fall and whisper a heartfelt expletive. There was no calling anyone now. Her cell phone had zero reception out here. It was one of the major benefits of coming. She couldn't text Eric, and the landline was now completely gone. Also, she was going to be subsisting on cereal and untoasted bread until she left, but that wasn't so bad. She was going to leave as soon as it was light out. In fact, she was chewing her nail and considering leaving now with the gun in the car just for safety, when movement at the edge of the forest caught her eye. You have got to be kidding me. She didn't think she could take another round of the bear. She squinted, stepping closer. Oh my God. She dropped the gun and ran, barefoot. It was a man, blood staining his jeans as he staggered up the grass. And Lord alone knew what was going to come out of the forest behind him, because how had he gotten injured in the first place? Maybe she should have brought the gun. He looked up as she approached, and Casey felt her eyes go wide. This was the most gorgeous man she had ever seen in her life. Dark eyes, dark hair, skin the color of caramel, a jaw that could cut glass, and he was ripped. The rain had pressed his black t-shirt against his
censored
in a very appealing way, and his lips were full and he was going to die if she couldn't get him inside. Come on, Casey gasped, looping his arm over her shoulders and pulling him towards the house. There's a bear. I know. And wolves? I know. His weary acceptance evaporated when a howl sounded from behind them. They both broke into a run, pounding up the stairs and into the house, and Casey yanked the glass door shut as the man fainted on the floor of the kitchen. Chapter 2. Casey's plans of lifting the man and carrying him to the fire proved impossible. The man was heavier than she had imagined, and lifting him was beyond her capabilities, drunk or sober. She settled for hooking her hands under his arms and dragging him backwards across the floor, leaving a bloody smear on the kitchen floor. Great. By the fire, she remembered the shattered wine glass. She hesitated, then checked the man's pulse. It was slow and steady, and the wound on his leg did not seem to be bleeding heavily any longer. Casey felt her way up the stairs, trying to swear softly as she collided with various corners and then felt through the linen closet for towels. Some clothes from her parents' room, please let there not be any embarrassing t-shirts, and some band-aids and antiseptic later. She was feeling her way back down the stairs and praying not to wind up on her face at the bottom. She was just scraping up the last pieces of glass when he asked, "I don't suppose I could use one of those towels?" Casey jumped and swore, then turned to look at him. He was even more gorgeous by firelight, damn it, all tousled and dark, with a rakish smile despite what must be blinding pain in his leg, and he was looking over her with frank appreciation that made her blush. He might like what he saw, but she was having serious regrets about packing her most oversized flannel. If she'd been made up, she wouldn't be feeling quite like such a slob right now. Hell, she'd even be happy with some lip gloss or a hair tie for the strawberry blonde waves that could never seem to settle on either being curly or straight. Her eyes were glinting green in the firelight, but they'd look a lot better with mascara, and her long legs, her best feature in her opinion, really looked better in heels. She choked back a laugh at the mental image of her misbuttoned plaid shirt and old shorts with heels. And he was staring at her, as if he was wondering if she could speak English. Towels? Right. Yeah, they're for you. You probably guessed that. Casey shut her mouth by force of will and sighed. Oh. Also, I should look at your leg. I brought down antiseptic. It's not much, but it'll do until we get you to the hospital. I don't need to go to the hospital. You need stitches. You left a lot of blood on the floor. And probably the rug. Her parents were not going to be pleased. I'll be fine. Look, I don't know your name. Nathaniel. Okay. Look, Nathaniel, you've lost some blood and you're going to get hypothermia unless you get out of those clothes. Casey looked away as he stripped off his shirt. Muscles and tattoos. Oh wow. Yeah. Like that. The thing is, I don't want you to die on the floor. Who else is here? No one's here, it's just my family's cabin. Do you normally guard it with a shotgun? No, Casey tried to decide where to begin with the story, and then shook her head. Not important. Are you sure? He paused, midway through toweling his torso off. Hey, I didn't mean to make you sad. Not your fault. Casey sighed and rubbed at her forehead. The wine was hitting hard, and she was beginning to remember why she didn't like drinking her troubles away. They tended to get worse, not better. Hardly fair that. Look. The man called Nathaniel unbuttoned his pants and pulled them off, revealing black briefs that highlighted some very impressive assets. Casey looked away, squeezing her eyes shut and wishing she hadn't seen. She was getting some very inappropriate ideas right about now. It was really nice of you to come out and get me. And I would like some of that antiseptic. And band-aids. Casey snorted. I don't think band-aids are going to be enough. Whatever. The point is, I'm grateful for your help, but you don't need to feel responsible for me. You're on our property, Casey pointed out. But really, it's no trouble. I don't have anywhere to be. Sadly true. Her throat closed up at the memory of asking Eric to come up here a few months ago. He was always too busy. Had he been cheating on her this whole damn time? Now you look mad. I am mad, Casey snapped. My boyfriend ran off with some 19-year-old nanny, and I came up here and wound up with a bear in the kitchen. The electric is out, there are wolves in the forest, and all the anger went out of her in a rush, and she felt tears pricking at her eyes. She hung her head, sniffing. God, I'm sorry. I'm just not having a very good week. Doesn't sound like it. Hey. He reached out, putting his hand on her knee. The jolt of energy was undeniable, and he pulled his hand back quickly, but still craned to look into her eyes. Your ex-boyfriend is an idiot. Forget him. Believe me, I'm trying. Casey nudged at the empty wine bottle with her foot. And before you say anything, I know this is about the worst thing I could be doing for myself. At least you're taking care of it on your own, he said pragmatically. Not throwing yourself at someone else. Right. Thoughts of straddling him right here on the floor evaporated, and Casey bit her lip. I should take a look at your leg. And you should, put on a shirt. Sure. It sounded like he was laughing at her. He pulled a tank top and flannel shirt out of the stack and put them on. It was really very unfair how he could go from looking like a J. Crew model to looking like a lumberjack and still be hot, so Casey busied herself with the supplies. You'll need to, turn over. He complied with a nod, showing off an ass that made her bite her lip and mutter things about life being unfair, and she set to work, trying to clean the wound as painlessly as she could. Huh? She said after a few minutes. What? His voice was muffled. It's really not as bad as I thought. I guess it just bled a lot. Casey poked at it gingerly. Maybe Band-Aids really were going to fix it. Yeah. But he sounded evasive. Well, one sec. She layered the Band-Aids over it and rolled a strip of athletic tape around his calf to keep it all in place. There you go, I guess. Thanks. I'm sure it'll heal quickly. Me too. She was really, really sure the wound had to have been bigger than it was. I'm going to go clean the kitchen floor. I'll do it. He reached out to take the towels. You need to sleep. She took them back. The couch is actually really comfortable. The beds aren't so much. And your leg won't like the stairs. Thanks. He watched her over the back of the couch as she scrubbed. Looks like the storm is quieting down. Shame? I like thunderstorms. Better with whiskey than wine, but it was actually kind of nice for a while. Until the bear. There was a silence. Casey turned and looked at him. Don't you even want to know? Right. Sorry. You said there was a bear, though. I thought that was how you got hurt. I guess I just assumed. But he had said, she remembered, that he knew about the bear. And the wolves? I heard there were bears around here, he said hastily, noticing her expression. But I didn't see any. I just fell. Sure. On your calf? Yeah. In 2 places on your calf? Yeah. And nowhere else got hurt? That's lucky, huh? Lucky, and a whole bucket of lies. But he didn't look like one of the idiots who would come up here to try to fight bears, or whatever the fad was with rich guys this week. He looked, in fact, like a man who had nothing to prove. You're not going to tell me why you were out there, huh? Nope. He had the grace, at least, to look ashamed. Look, is anyone looking for you? Going to come find you with guns? No, he said decisively. We're safe here. Good. Somehow, however, she found it precisely the opposite of reassuring. Look, you should get some rest. I'll be staying up for a bit. Looking out the window with the shotgun? He guessed, and Casey shrugged. I've already gotten a bear and a guy coming out of the forest tonight. I think I'll just make sure there's nothing else coming. There isn't. But he yawned. I am tired, though. Nathaniel? Casey went to peer over the back of the couch. Between one breath and the next, he seemed to have fallen asleep. You never said what your name was, he murmured, trying to open his eyes. Casey. Casey. Nice to meet you. And you. Get some sleep. She hopped up on the counter to watch the forest. Without the lightning, the backyard wasn't much more than a mass of black, the occasional tree shining in the moonlight as storm clouds scudded across the moon. Branches were still lashing to and fro in the wind, and occasionally she saw a piece of the ruined picnic table blow across the grass. A strange night. A very strange night. A wrath of God storm, a bear and a hot man sleeping on her couch. Casey risked a glance over at Nathaniel, now deeply asleep with one well-muscled arm thrown up over his head. Tomorrow, she decided, she was going to find out some answers. Chapter 3. The fire was crackling merrily, there was fresh coffee brewing, and she could smell toast. Casey snuggled in under the blankets and smiled. She dozed off where? In the kitchen, she remembered, but that didn't make any sense, and she certainly wasn't there now. She sat bolt upright, spilling blankets off herself. "Good morning," Nathaniel said from the kitchen. "It's a good thing you're up." "Oh?" Casey rubbed at her eyes. "Why?" "I don't know how you like your eggs." "Scrambled, please." "Is the power back on?" "Not yet. The stove's gas. I thought we should use up the eggs before they went bad." "Right." Casey stretched, yawning. "Did you go out to get more firewood?" "Yeah. You really did in that bottom step." His grin was infectious. "You meant to aim there, right?" Casey stopped mid-stretch. Last night was flooding back to her now, from the bear to Nathaniel's disappearance. Something niggled at her mind and she frowned. They had talked about bears, wolves. But she was sure she hadn't told Nathaniel that the bear came into the house. "How do you know I shot the step?" she asked slowly. At the stove, Nathaniel froze. Then he said, not looking up, "Well, you have a shotgun there and a step that looks like kindling. Didn't you say there were bears around?" "And wolves," Casey said. She was looking for the same reaction he'd had on the lawn the night before, and she got it. He went still, then had to force himself to keep moving. "Don't like wolves?" "Does anyone like wolves?" he asked her. "They're dangerous, vicious." "My dad says not to worry too much," Casey offered. "I used to get really scared, but he told me wolves don't seek people out unless they're starving or rabid. Our wolves around here are fine, as far as I know." "You looked scared last night." "Look," Casey said, stung. She was not a coward. "Last night was terrible. The power went out, I was alone, and that bear came into the house. And not through the glass, he opened the door." Nathaniel looked up. He had stopped stirring the eggs entirely, and his eyes were fixed on hers. "Can I?" Casey looked away. "Can you?" His voice was soft as he prompted her. "I wanted to tell you something. Tell anyone. But it's stupid." "I won't think it's stupid," he promised at once, and to her surprise, he seemed to mean it. "My sister got chased by a bear once," Casey explained. "She said bears' eyes were black and really cold, like people say about sharks. She said there was no pity or anything. It was going to kill her. Not because it was cruel or anything, but just, that's what it was. It killed to eat. But when the bear came in last night, it wasn't like that at all." "It wasn't?" Nathaniel turned off the stove and came to sit on the arm of the couch. His brown eyes were intent. "No. It looked?" Casey searched for the word. "Pleading. It wanted help. It was injured." She shook her head. "I know that's stupid. Bears don't ask for help, it didn't know what it was doing. Maybe it smelled food and it was just scared because of the pain. But its eyes seemed warm. It seemed like it really saw me. Shock, I guess. Last night, in the heat of the moment, she thought she would tell Jenna all about this. Now she was thinking better of it. In the cold, hard light of day, she could see it was nothing more than craziness to think that she had, communed with a bear. The words sounded ridiculous coming out of her mouth. But Nathaniel didn't seem to think so. "That's why you shot the step," he said slowly. "You didn't want to hurt it." Casey flushed and looked away. She wanted to sink through the floor at the thought of the confrontation. Sure, advancing had been a smart move. But who tried to reason with a bear? "I don't want to hurt you." It was already hurt pretty badly. For some reason, she felt almost guilty. It was those human eyes, wasn't it? If a human came in hurt, she would never have sent them back into the woods. Nathaniel was proof of that. But the bear she had driven away. Which made sense, she told herself. She didn't know how to fix a bear's wounds, and it would have killed her before it let her try. Still, the guilt would not leave. I wonder if it survived. It did, he said confidently. Bears are tough. I hope so. Casey's stomach rumbled. Man, I could eat a horse. The eggs. He leapt off the end of the couch and stumbled, wincing. I'll get them. Casey scrambled over and sat him down. And then we should look at your leg. I forgot. It'll be okay. Well, we should change the bandages anyway. She surveyed the eggs in the pan and held back a grimace. They were ruined, but she could hardly complain about food he'd cooked. She scraped the best of them onto his plate and took the rest, carrying plates and forks back to the couch. These are awful, he said after one bite. No. Casey chewed. And chewed. And chewed some more. I think they're good. I'm making more. He snatched the plate out of her hands and limped off. Did you carry me to the couch? Casey asked him, and he smiled up at her briefly from where he was scrubbing the pan. You fell asleep on the counter. Now that she thought about it, she could remember strong arms lifting her and holding her close. She had snuggled closer and he had laughed a little bit, not a mean laugh, a pleased one. She remembered him tucking her in. She blushed and looked away. Thanks. She rubbed her face and looked around. The bloody towels were still piled by the hearth. So how did you get hurt? It's not important. Well, is someone looking for you? That took more thought than she expected, to get an answer. No, he said finally. I mean, did anyone know you were out here? Someone's going to worry, friends, family? Co-workers? Nope. Really, I have gas in the car, I could take you. No. He didn't yell, but his tone stopped her dead. They know I can take care of myself in the forest. But if you hadn't found the cabin, Casey said. I might have died, yes. He looked up, and his eyes were so calm that she shivered. That's why they'd be worried, she explained slowly. They'd be worried you were hurt, or dead. Some things are unavoidable, he said oddly. He held up a hand to forestall further conversation. I really don't want to talk about it. Now 2 eggs or 3? 2 is fine. Casey frowned and looked away. Her head wasn't hurting, but everything about Eric was flooding back. Was it too early to start drinking again? Nathaniel let her think while he cooked. What he was thinking, she could not have said. She stole glances at him sometimes, but he seemed entirely absorbed in the task of whisking the eggs. If it bothered him at all that he could have died, there was no sign of that now. Casey sighed and tipped her head back on the couch. Where was Eric now? Bad idea, her mind told her, but the thought was like pressing on a bruise. It was Saturday morning, he was probably sleeping in beside, what was her name? Anna. He'd thrown it at her a few times, like he was trying to convince himself that he knew she had a name. Anna and I understand each other. What the hell did that even mean? If I give you these eggs, are you going to yell at me? Nathaniel asked. You look really angry. Just my stupid ex. Casey took the plate of eggs. Sorry. And don't be all sympathetic, she warned, pointing her fork at him. I came up here so I wouldn't have to listen to all that crap. Which crap? He asked, mouth full of eggs. Oh, he was never good enough for you, Casey mimicked. I never liked him, you can do so much better. See? Crap. I can't take that yet. Maybe in a week. Of course, I'll probably be fired by then. So you're not going to try to get him back? Hell no. Her answer surprised her. He grinned. I don't know what I mean. I feel like shit that he ran off with some 19-year-old, you know? But I don't want any part of someone who does that. Not at all. Good, Nathaniel said decisively. Don't waste your time with people like that. Sounds like you've been through the same sort of thing. Everyone has, I think. But he sounded aggrieved. It's a terrible thing to do, people know that. And it doesn't work out. But they do it anyway. There's no loyalty. We weren't married, Casey said miserably. Doesn't matter, he said at once. You're with someone, you should be loyal to them. Respect them. If he didn't want to be with you, he could have said that and broken things off. Instead, he tried to pretend it was true love, right? He couldn't help himself. It was meant to be. He shook his head. Coward. Coward, Casey said thoughtfully. I did a lot of bastard and slob last night. I like coward. Maybe I'll add that one in. Don't even think about him, Nathaniel advised her. Why spend any more time? I have no good answer to that. Casey. He took the plates and set them aside. You're funny and smart and kind and brave as hell. You're just saying that because I saved your life. Right. You saved my life. You didn't hide in here with your gun. You didn't shoot that bear because you were scared. You're going to tell me that I barely know you, but I think I know more about you from these few hours than most of the people you know. You're all those things I said, and you know what? You're drop-dead gorgeous. Your ex made the biggest mistake of his life. You're sweet. Casey was blushing. This was the sort of pity she hadn't wanted, but it didn't sound like pity coming from him. I'm not sweet, he admitted. It came out a little like a growl, making her shiver. Then what are you? Instead of answering, he stood, pulling her up after him and enfolding her in his arms. Before she could even react, his lips came down on hers. Chapter 4. He meant it to be one.
Censored.
She knew because he drew back after it with a rueful smile. But his arms did not release her, and Casey didn't even hesitate before taking his shirt in her hands and drawing him back down for more. His lips were soft but demanding, his
censored
parting her lips as he held her close. The
censored
deepened, and Casey heard herself moan. Somehow her arms had come around his neck, and she was standing on tiptoe to
censored
him. Her body was pressed up against his, and his hands had slid up under the loose flannel shirt. His fingertips trailed over her back and back down, drifting under the waistband of her shorts. Casey pressed herself close, inviting his touch. Her skin was on fire, and she wanted nothing more than for him to push her shorts down. What was she doing? 24 hours ago she'd been crying her eyes out, trying to eat a bagel sandwich on the subway, and then heading out of town with a rented car and 3 bottles of wine. She'd been a wreck. Was this a rebound? Well, that would fit with the theme of the weekend, but to tell the truth, she didn't feel like it was. She would have wanted Nathaniel any time he strolled in the door. She was sure he would have been the first person she noticed in any room, and as ridiculous as it was, when he said he knew her after only a few hours, she knew exactly what he meant. From the words he said to the way he said them, from cooking her eggs to offering to clean the kitchen floor, this man was gold. And Casey should know, she'd seen her share of men trying to be the perfect guy for a night to get into her pants. Something about him said this wasn't a game to him. He offered to clean the floor because he had bled on it. He stoked the fire because it needed doing. He carried her to bed because she was asleep on the counter, and he cooked her breakfast because it would be nice. And good God, he was hot. How was he not married? She supposed he might be. The thought hit just at the moment that he pulled away again. I shouldn't have done that. Why? She asked warily. You're still sad, we only met last night. No girlfriend then? When she saw how offended he looked, she backtracked hastily. Sorry. I've met my fair share of jokers. But I should have known you wouldn't. No, you shouldn't, he sighed and ran his fingers through his hair, muscles rippled beneath the tank top. You don't really know me. As far as you know, I'm just some guy who wanders around forests. And as far as you know, I'm some girl who sleeps on counters with shotguns and drinks too much, Casey pointed out. His laugh was warm and she smiled. Is it crazy to say I think we both know the other person is more than that? It can't just be me, right? You?
Censored.
Me. Do you feel a connection, too? She closed her mouth on the question. It would be one of the most cliched things ever. She looked down, crossing her arms. Do you regret it? Hey. His voice was rough, and she was in his arms the next moment, one hand pressing in the small of her back, the other cupping her cheek. "No. I don't regret it. I thought you might though." "Not for a second." Casey pulled him close again, her lips meeting his. She made small sounds of contentment, and heard him growl in response. "Here." He picked her up, and settled back on the couch with her straddling him. He groaned when she ground her hips against his. "Woman, you do not know what you're asking for."
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
The howl of wolves interrupted them. Close, and answered almost immediately by another howl. Casey shook her head, jolted out of the mood by the voice in her head that screamed danger. Wolves weren't going to hurt them. But Nathaniel was up now, his eyes scanning the backyard. "It's nothing," Casey assured him, pushing herself up on her elbows. "It's not nothing." He shook his head at once. "Get upstairs. Now." "What?" "I don't have time to repeat things. You need to get upstairs." But there. Casey caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of the trees. One wolf, then two. "Get upstairs." He snatched the shotgun and the rounds off the counter and shoved them into her hands. "Go." "What are you going to do?" "Don't," he took a deep breath. "Don't worry about me." "Nathaniel." To her surprise, his face softened. He pulled her close gently for a
Censored.
Then he drew away, his face going cold again. "Go. Don't let them up those stairs." Panic flared in her blood, and she took the stairs two at a time. She curled onto the floor, shaking so badly she could hardly check the rounds. Her mind was full of images, wolves stalking through the house, creeping up the stairs. In her nightmare, their eyes were red and they were growling. They weren't looking for prey, they were hunting her, coming right for her like a serial killer in the house. "I know you're there," the growl said. It would be like the bear, intelligence where there should be none. What was going on up here? She had to stop thinking about this. If she didn't, she would start screaming. Why in hell had she decided to come up to the cabin this weekend? A sound from the yard nearly made her drop the shotgun. She swore under her breath and crawled, pushing open the master bedroom door and keeping low until she got to the window. What she saw made her want to throw up. There were 12 wolves, no 20. 23. 25. They were emerging from the forest in twos and threes, a broad arc surrounding the house. Their growls together were enough to make Casey whimper in fear. This couldn't be real. This wasn't happening. The sound of the sliding door opening below nearly made her jump out of her skin. She wanted to scream when she saw Nathaniel limp out onto the porch. He looked around himself at the wolves and they stopped, the growls growing in strength. One or two crept closer and backed away with snarls as he looked over at them. Then, as one, they began to close in again. And Nathaniel changed. Casey pressed her hand over her mouth as he grew before her eyes, clothes replaced with fur, face replaced with a snout. Up and up he grew, shaggy and powerful. The bear roared, swiped with its claws at the pack of wolves, and then took off for the forest at a heavy run, bowling several wolves aside with powerful swipes of its paws and disappearing into the trees. With a chilling howl, the wolves took off after him. Upstairs, Casey slid down the wall, shaking. Her hands were clenched around the gun so tightly that she thought she might never let it go. What the hell was she supposed to do now? Chapter 5. She needed to go after him. Casey snatched up the shotgun and pounded down the stairs. She didn't care how tough he said bears were. One bear against dozens of wolves were bad odds. So he needed help. She pulled on her shoes hurriedly, fingers trembling on the laces, then paused. Was this the craziest idea she'd ever had? Yes. But he didn't have anyone to help him. Her stomach twisted. She knew beyond a doubt that those wolves weren't normal, they were like him maybe. Shapeshifters or something. All those thoughts she'd had of the wolves creeping up the stairs towards her, those had been real, only it was him they were looking for. She couldn't let him stay out there alone. Or possibly she was going insane. She sank her head into her hands. She had just seen a man transform into a bear. That meant she should be going to the hospital, not wandering into the forest with a shotgun. She was clearly still drunk. Or maybe she was dreaming. She reached out with her bare foot and kicked the corner of the table. Ow. Not dreaming then. Muttering, Casey pulled on the second shoe. She shouldn't do this. A bear against that many wolves were terrible odds, but how much was Casey going to help, really? She had 12 rounds. Even if she was a perfect shot, that wasn't going to take down all of the wolves, and, she thought with a chill, it wasn't likely she'd have enough time to get 12 shots off before they got to her. She was going to get torn apart by rabid wolves if she went out there. Unless she wasn't, because part of her brain was still insisting that this had to be a hallucination. Men did not turn into bears. That was something out of popular movies, or science fiction, or something. Superheroes. She wasn't 12 anymore, pretending she could fly or be invisible. Magic didn't exist. She put down the gun and was just staring at her hands, trying to decide whether she should even attempt to drive into town, when a howl sounded from the woods. That was it. Maybe it was a hallucination. But if it wasn't, then Nathaniel needed her help. And if it was, then those wolves were totally normal and they were going to stay well clear of her. Casey slipped the extra rounds into her pocket and started running, because now that she'd decided to go into the woods, the same part of her brain that had been calling her crazy was now screaming at her to turn around and go back. Like hell. Casey crashed into the trees, looking around. She wasn't exactly a master tracker, but it didn't take much expertise to see where they'd gone. There was a trail of crushed plants a few feet wide leading into the forest. Swallowing hard, she chambered the weapon and set off. She needed to move as quietly as she could, and not let herself get exhausted. The growl was low, almost inaudible, but enough to make the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Her conscious mind might not have noticed, but her instincts were screaming at her to run. Turning, Casey brought the gun up partway, and took an involuntary step back. The bear towered over her, black in contrast to Nathaniel's brown. It thudded down onto 4 paws and snarled, pacing sideways. She stumbled back as it advanced, courage fleeing. Never run away from a bear. It was herding her back to the house, she realized. She looked behind her, then at the bear. The howls nearby increased, and its head turned. When it looked back, Casey had put down the gun. Her hands were up and her brain was telling her not to be so damn stupid, but she could not let Nathaniel stay out here alone. I'm here for Nathaniel, she said quietly. She swore she could see the same intelligence in this bear's eyes. He was hurt, and he stayed with me at the cabin last night. But the wolves found him, and I need to go help. There was a pause, and Casey felt tears flood her eyes. Look, I know what he is. I saw. But he's all alone. I promise I won't hurt you. I just need to get past. The bear roared and tossed its head, and shrank rapidly, into a man with blonde hair and the cheekbones of a Greek god. Like Nathaniel, he was one of the most beautiful men she'd ever seen in her life. And like Nathaniel, he was wounded. Now that fur wasn't covering him, she could see bruises and healing puncture wounds on his arms and legs. It was a wolf bite, Casey said slowly. On his leg. You're telling me Nathaniel's alive? Another howl sounded, and Casey wanted to snarl in frustration. He was a few minutes ago. Please, we have to go help him. How many wolves did you see? 25 at least. Any black or all gray and white? All gray and white. Look. Was there one that was all white? No, Casey said, thinking about it. Then we've got a fighting chance. Get back to the cabin, I'll take care of this. I'm coming with you, Casey said stubbornly. You're not prepared for this, he told her. And Nathaniel would probably kill me if I let you go into danger. Look, you can let me come with you, in which case I might take down a few of those wolves, or you can leave me here, in which case I'll just follow you on my own. He stared at her and she stared back stubbornly. I'll climb up a tree, Casey offered. Fine. Get on my back when I transform. It was a tricky process, and there was nothing to hold onto when she got up there. When he took off, it was all she could do not to scream. She dug her fingers into his fur, hoping she wasn't hurting him, and lay low to avoid branches as he crashed through the undergrowth. The sounds of the fight were terrifying. Roars sounded, followed by snarls and yelps. Howls came from the woods ahead, and there were screams of pain. No birds sang here, and there was not the faintest hint of movement from squirrels or mice. Everything had fled this supernatural battle, and Casey was trying to keep from wishing she'd done the same. When the bear stopped at a tree and tossed his head, she hopped off and scrambled up, the bark rough on her hands. She loved climbing trees as a child. Her muscles, unused to this now, were burning. Casey gritted her teeth and promised every deity she could think of that she would stay in much better shape if she got through this. When she turned to look, she gasped. The fight raging below was a vicious tangle of brown and gray and white and black. Casey swallowed and took aim, looking down the sights at a wolf that was clearly planning to dive back into the fray. The sound of the gunshot stopped the fight for a moment, and a few wolves turned on her, snarling. Casey gave a silent prayer, reloaded the gun, and took aim again. Another shot, well away from Nathaniel and his friend. She missed and swore. But there was hope. The wolves, now with 3 enemies instead of 1, were beginning to fall as they milled about. Another bear crashed out of the undergrowth, its brown coat peppered with gray, and Casey just managed to avoid pulling the trigger. Another bullet, another wolf. The new bear roared at her and she waved, tentatively. Hopefully he understood. Hopefully he couldn't climb trees. She reloaded and shot, reloaded and shot. Time seemed to disappear, and even the pain was fading as the shotgun slammed back against her shoulder. Adrenaline was thrumming in her blood. They were so close to winning. She almost missed the white wolf. It was creeping through the forest nearby, drawing close to the fight with its lips drawn back in a snarl. She had only 1 shot left. Casey loaded the gun quietly, took aim. The shot blew the wolf over sideways, and she screamed. The other wolves looked around, howling, and Casey screamed all the more as the wolf dragged itself upright. Its head swung around, and its pale eyes fixed on her for a long moment. Then it charged out of the bushes, making directly for Nathaniel. If she had not shot it, Casey shuddered to think how the fight would have gone. Even wounded, bleeding heavily, the white wolf was a terror to behold. Its jaws fastened around fur black and brown, and the bears roared in pain as they converged on it. Snarls rang through the air and the snapping of teeth. But at last the wolf faltered, and Casey hid her face as Nathaniel reared great paws swiping down. There was a howl, a scream, and the rest of the wolves fled into the forest. Casey scrambled down from the tree and ran, catching Nathaniel as he transformed and stumbled into her arms. His face had gone gray with pain, and there were new marks on his arms and legs. "You came for me," he whispered. "Of course I did. I couldn't let you fight alone." He smiled tiredly. "Loyalty," he whispered. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and drew her close for a
Censored.
Chapter 6. "He's not really a king," James said thoughtfully. "We don't have kings." "So what then? Alpha?" "That's a wolf term." His look was warning. "Well, what would you call him?" Casey looked over to where Nathaniel was in close conference with Victor, an older man with a grizzled beard. "Mostly we just call him Nathaniel. Everyone knows who he is." James took a sip of beer and cracked his neck. "Who was the white wolf?" "Old enemy." James shrugged. "It's difficult to explain. You just don't want to tell me, because you don't want me spilling all your secrets." "That too," he admitted. "I'm not going to." Casey grinned at his dubious look. "I mean, come on. I tell my family and friends I saw 3 men turn into bears and fight a pack of 30 wolves, and I shot a few wolves. I don't even have a scratch. They're going to lock me up and make sure I never have a shotgun again." "You make a good point." James settled back in his chair. "We're just told never to let anyone know. We grow up learning to hide what we are." "So are you humans who transform into bears, or bears who transform into humans?" "Both?" "I don't know. I guess we're human. We're always born human, and then we learn to control the transformations. I hated learning to walk as a human, I still remember that." It's so much easier with 4 legs than 2. I hadn't thought of that. Casey took a sip of beer. So there's a whole world out there of people like you. Shifters. Yep. He looked up. Nathaniel's coming to talk to you. I'll go check on the burgers. How are you? Nathaniel asked as he arrived. I'm going to have a pretty righteous bruise from the shotgun, but otherwise okay. Casey smiled up at him. How are you? I'll be all right. You got all of the major things. He gave a rueful smile at his arms, peppered with band-aids. And as you saw, I heal quickly. Ridiculously quickly, Casey agreed. So, what happened out there? You remember all that stuff your dad told you about wolves? Well, it's usually true, but lately around here, the wolves are getting bolder. Every year, a few more farmers were reporting livestock gone, people were reporting that they lost their pets, kids were saying they saw wolves in the woods. He sighed and rubbed his head. Well, that wolf you saw, the white one, he wasn't just a shifter, he was a mage too. He was doing something to the native wolves around here, changing them and their instincts. And he was part of the spell. There was no undoing it without him agreeing to, or dying. We told him what he was doing wasn't natural, that we'd stop him if he didn't stop it on his own. And he's been out for us ever since. Today, he thought he'd caught me alone. And he sent real wolves, not shifters, to make a point. He sighed heavily. They didn't have to die. I'm sorry, Casey murmured. It's not your fault. They'd been turned into monsters. Nothing anyone did would have kept them from attacking. But maybe the ones that are left will turn back into what they were. He looked over at her, draining the last of his beer. Thank you for coming out there. I hoped you wouldn't, but it was a close fight, even with James and Victor. If you hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened. I'm glad you're safe. Casey leaned back in her seat and crossed her legs, letting her eyes drift over the muscles in his arms and across his.
Censored.
He noticed, and his eyes darkened with.
Censored.
Come with me. But James. Come on. He pulled her into the house and up the stairs, stripping off his shirt when they reached the landing and pinning her against the wall. 1.
Censored.
And her knees went weak. So one thing to know about shifters.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
When the world came back to normal, Casey heard him laugh low in his throat. Perfect, he murmured. He rolled away, and then held out his arms so she could nestle against him. Perfect, she agreed. Thank you for reading my book. If you like this story, I think you'll enjoy my book. Destiny of the Dragon Prince. A big favor to ask. I would really love it if you could take a few seconds to leave me a review. Thank you so much in advance. About the author. Selina Coffey is a romance writer who lives happily in London with her husband and son. She is a hopeless romantic who grew up always believing in love, and she is not ashamed to admit this. It is this belief that makes her so passionate about writing crazy love stories. A stereotypical girly girl, she loves shopping. So whenever she gets a chance and the spare cash, you will probably find her browsing online for the next pair of shoes to add to her collection. You can find her online at www.selinacoffee.com. Contact her at hello@selinacoffee.com. Closing credits. This has been Bear Lust. Written by Selina Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited. Production copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited.